I lost my mother twice. The first time, I was 5 years old. A crowded market. Rain on warm pavement. Vendors shouting over each other. The smell of oranges, wet cardboard, and smoke from a food cart somewhere behind me. 1 second, I was holding her hand. The next second, I wasn't. That is all catastrophe needs. 1 second. I remember looking up and seeing nothing but coats, elbows, umbrellas, strangers. No one knew my name. No one stopped long enough to understand that a child's entire world had just disappeared. I screamed until my throat burned. Then I cried without sound. Hours later, police found me near a bus terminal across the city. 6 hours gone. Long enough to ruin one childhood. Long enough to break one mother into pieces she would spend 20 years trying to gather back. I couldn't give them an address. Children don't remember streets. We remember curtains, the smell of soap, the sound of dishes, the way a mother's hand feels when it closes around ours. None of that helped. So I entered the system: shelters, temporary homes, caseworkers with tired eyes, rooms where I was told which drawer was mine before anyone asked if I was hungry. Some people were kind, some were careless, most were temporary. I learned not to ask how long I could stay. I learned to pack quickly, eat before the food got cold, and say thank you before people changed their minds. But one memory stayed: a flash of green, oval stone, gold edges, sunlight catching it like fire. Sometimes I saw it in dreams, sometimes on a wrist, sometimes moving above me in a crowd. I never knew what it meant. By 25, I had stopped expecting miracles. I rented a narrow apartment above a repair shop. The floor shook whenever engines started downstairs. The sink leaked when it rained. The walls were thin enough to hear other people's lives falling apart. Still, it was mine. I worked mornings at a clinic reception desk, nights entering shipping data for a logistics company, and weekends whenever someone needed an extra pair of hands. Routine became my religion. Hope was expensive. Then one Thursday evening, someone knocked. A woman stood outside my door with an older attorney beside her. Elegant coat, trembling hands. Eyes already full before I said a word. She looked at me the way starving people look at bread. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I believe I'm your mother." I almost closed the door. Not because I was cruel. Because hope had become suspicious to me. Then I saw the bracelet on her wrist. Green stone, oval setting, gold edges worn soft with age. The flash from every dream. My knees weakened before logic did. The attorney explained quietly. My mother had not simply found me that week. She had been preparing for months before she ever knocked on my door. Old records, a private investigator, hospital markers, a DNA test. The DNA had confirmed enough for her heart, but not yet enough for the world. It had not changed my birth record. It had not reached the court. It had not been entered into any public estate file. My mother understood that. That was why she had been careful, afraid to hope out loud, but already making room for me on paper. Not enough for the world to recognize me yet, but enough for her to stop asking permission to love me. We spoke for 3 hours. She knew the scar on my left knee from a garden stone, the stuffed rabbit I used to sleep with, the lullaby she sang during storms. No foster parent had ever known those things. No stranger could have invented them. At one point, she reached for my hand, then stopped halfway, as if touching me too quickly might make me disappear again. So I took hers. That was when she cried. Not loudly, not beautifully, just like a woman who had been holding her breath for 20 years. By the time she left, my apartment looked exactly the same, but I didn't. 3 days later, I stepped through the gates of the house where I had once belonged. My mother's house stood behind iron gates lined with magnolia trees. The driveway curved through trimmed gardens and old stone lanterns darkened by weather. I expected something cold. Rich homes often are. Instead, I found warmth arranged carefully over years. Bookshelves with worn corners. Fresh bread cooling in the kitchen. Flowers cut from the garden. Chairs repaired instead of replaced. A dog bed still near the fireplace, even though the dog had died years before. Nothing felt flashy. Everything felt chosen. Then I noticed the one absence large enough to hurt. Photographs were everywhere. Family dinners, graduations, vacations, holiday tables, birthdays with candles and crowded smiles. But no photos of me. Of course there weren't. I had been missing for 20 years. Still, seeing the empty place where I should have existed made my chest tighten. My mother noticed immediately. The next morning, she placed a silver frame beside my breakfast plate. Inside was a picture from the day we met. We both looked stunned. "We start where we are," she said. That became the language of our short time together. No dramatic speeches, no expensive gifts to compensate for history, no pretending 20 years could be repaired in a weekend. Just steady corrections. She learned I hated loud televisions. She bought the tea I liked after hearing me mention it once. She asked if I preferred soft blankets or heavy ones. When I said I usually skipped breakfast to save time, she looked personally offended and began cooking every morning. Burned toast twice, oversalted soup once, then blamed the stove with complete seriousness. I laughed harder than the joke deserved, because I was not laughing at the stove. I was laughing because someone was trying. For me. Every night, she left the hallway light on. The first time I asked why, she looked embarrassed. "I know you're not 5 anymore," she said. "But I still want there to be a light waiting when you come home." That sentence did something to me, because no one had ever waited for me with a light on. If you're listening right now, tell me where you're hearing this story from in the comments below. I'd truly love to know you. One night, I came downstairs for water and found my mother sitting alone in the dark kitchen. She was simply looking toward the stairs. "What are you doing?" I asked. She startled, as if I had caught her stealing. "Nothing." Then she smiled sadly. "I'm practicing not missing you in advance." I had to leave the room before she saw me cry. Love can be clumsy when it arrives late. That made it more painful, not less. Sometimes I caught her studying my face while pretending to read. Sometimes she touched my sleeve as she passed, just to confirm I was real. Once, I fell asleep on the sofa after work. When I woke, my shoes had been cleaned and placed neatly by the door. My coat was hanging where I could reach it. A glass of water sat beside me. No one had ever cared for me in such small, useless ways. That was what made it unbearable. She was not trying to impress me, she was trying to mother me. Another evening, I found her in the laundry room, holding one of my old thrift store sweaters like it was something precious. "It has a hole," I said. "I know," she answered. Then she folded it anyway, carefully, like even the damaged things I brought with me deserved a place. That was Evelyn. She did not try to erase the life I had survived. She tried to make room for it. 2 weeks later, she opened the last door at the end of the upstairs hallway. Inside was a pale yellow bedroom. My room. The room of the child who vanished. Curtains had been replaced over time in the same color. Shelves dusted weekly. A wooden rabbit sat on the dresser. Mine. Height marks still lined the closet frame. Small pencil lines climbing upward, then stopping forever at age 5. I touched the last mark with one finger. It was lower than my hip. That nearly broke me. Not because I remembered being that small, because she did. "I couldn't erase proof you existed," she said quietly. That was the first time I called her mom, only once, barely above a whisper. She turned away so I would not see her tears. Then there was Marianne, my aunt, younger sister, never married, Lived in the West Wing apartment after helping Evelyn through difficult years. That was how staff described it: helpful, devoted, loyal. But warmth has temperature. Hers never reached the eyes. At first, Marianne was careful. Too careful. She did not insult me. She did not raise her voice. She did not do anything obvious enough for my mother to confront. She smiled softly and said things that looked kind from a distance. "I hope life was gentle to you," she said one afternoon. Then her eyes moved over my coat, my shoes, my hands. "Of course, the system can leave marks people don't notice at first." I looked at her. She smiled again, not warmly. Another time, while my mother was answering a call in the next room, Marianne leaned toward me and said, "Evelyn trusts with her heart. I've always had to protect her with my head." It sounded like devotion. It felt like warning. My mother controlled the estate, the house, several commercial properties, majority shares in the family logistics company, trust accounts established by my grandfather. Marianne had worked beside her for years, but never above her. Then I arrived. Even I could see what that meant. One evening, I passed the study and heard raised voices. "You are rewriting everything for a stranger," Marianne snapped. "She is not a stranger," my mother replied. "She is my daughter. She is a test result. She is my child." Then my mother said something lower. "I nearly missed it. You were at the market that day." Silence hit the room like broken glass. I moved away before the door opened. That night, my mother came to my room carrying a brass key. Old, heavy. "This belonged to Father," she said. "He kept private records. No one else could access." She closed my fingers around it. "If anything unexpected happens, use this for the last door in the hall." "You sound dramatic," I said. "I sound late." I asked what that meant. She looked at me for a long moment, then brushed a strand of hair from my face. "It means I lost too much time believing people would tell the truth if truth mattered enough." The next morning, she was cheerful again. Coffee, emails, meetings. At noon, she sent a message asking if I preferred jasmine rice or brown rice for dinner. I was still smiling at the screen when the hospital called. At first, I almost didn't answer. I thought it was spam. Then I saw the number and felt something in my body go still. By the time I reached the hospital, her hands were already cold. The doctor said words like, "heart, collapse, too late." I only heard one thing. I had finally become someone's daughter again, and time had taken my mother before I knew how to be one. When I returned home, the house still smelled faintly of the soup she had burned 2 nights before. Her coat was still hanging by the door. Her cup was still in the sink. The hallway light was still on. And Marianne was already seated in the living room, dressed in cream, calm, prepared. Beside her stood a lawyer I had never seen before. That was when instinct whispered something simple: this did not begin today. The funeral was held 3 days later. Rain threatened all morning, but never arrived. The sky stayed gray and withholding, as if even weather was unsure how much grief to offer. People came in polished black cars and lowered voices. Executives from the company, neighbors who sent flowers but rarely visited, board members with perfect condolences. Relatives who remembered blood whenever money was nearby. Old friends who hugged me too long because they did not know what else to do. I stood near the coffin and accepted sympathy from strangers who studied my face too carefully. Some knew who I was. Some doubted it. Some hoped I was temporary. Grief makes people honest in tiny ways. My mother looked smaller than memory inside the polished wood. I hated that. She had once filled rooms. Now silence was doing it for her. I wanted to tell everyone she laughed loudly when tea spilled, that she sang badly while gardening, that she never remembered where she placed her reading glasses because they were usually on her head. But funerals flatten people into flowers and adjectives. My aunt moved through the room like she had rehearsed for years. She directed seating, adjusted flowers, touched elbows, whispered to caterers. She spoke softly about family strength and carrying on Evelyn's legacy. Anyone watching would have thought she was holding the house together. They would not have noticed how often her eyes checked where I stood, or how quickly she intercepted anyone who spoke to me too long. When the service ended, we drove to the cemetery in a silence that felt arranged. I watched the casket lowered into the ground, and understood something terrible. I had waited 20 years to find my mother, and only had 3 months to lose her. 3 months of breakfasts. 3 months of hearing my real name spoken gently. 3 months of learning what safety sounded like. 3 months of beginning, then dirt. Shh. Most guests left quickly after burial. Grief has schedules when catered. Cars disappeared, umbrellas folded, conversations turned practical. I remained beside the grave, long after the crowd thinned. My shoes sank slightly into wet grass. I did not move. If I left, it would feel final in a way the hospital had not. Marianne stepped beside me carrying an umbrella she did not need. "You should prepare yourself," she said. "For what?" "For reality." I turned to face her fully. No audience now. No performance required. "She hadn't finished making you official," Marianne said. "No court language, no big speech, just one sentence, sharp enough to cut. She was my mother." She wanted to believe that. The sentence hit harder than if she had shouted. Then she leaned slightly closer. "Wanting something doesn't make it true." Back at the house, guests were guided toward refreshments. I was guided toward the study. My mother's coat was still hanging by the front door. Her cup was still in the sink. The house still smelled faintly of the soup she had burned 2 nights before. The hallway light she left on for me was still glowing. And Marianne was already speaking about belongings, access, rooms, what I could take, what I could not. That was when the cruelty became clear. She did not need to yell. She only needed to treat my mother's life like inventory before grief had even cooled. The lawyer opened a black folder. He spoke politely. Too politely. He explained that an older will was already on file. It had been written years earlier, when my mother was still unmarried and had no legally recognized child. It left control of the house and estate to Marianne. At least on paper. He was careful with his wording. He never said this was the only will. He said it was the only one they were prepared to recognize. At the time, I did not understand how important that distinction was. A newer signed copy could still exist somewhere, if someone delayed it, hidden it, or made sure no one knew where to look. Years later, I would understand perfectly. "My mother was changing everything," I said. "She was emotional," Marianne answered. I looked at her. She found her daughter. She found a woman with a story. That was the first time I felt something inside me turn cold, not break, turn. The lawyer said there would be a formal process, that I could ask questions later, that nothing had to be unpleasant. But his words were only wallpaper. The message was simple. Marianne had the house, Marianne had the lawyer, Marianne had the room, and I had grief. Then she slid a paper toward me. It was not a court order. I know that now. But that day, with my mother freshly buried, and everyone acting as if Marianne already owned the walls, it felt like one. The DNA test proved enough for my mother. But it had not changed my birth record. It had not reached the court. It had not entered the estate file. Marianne knew that. She was not holding absolute legal power. She was holding timing, grief, confusion. A room full of people who already treated her like the owner. That was how she pushed me out. Not because the truth was weak, because I was. "You may collect your belongings within 48 hours, she said. I stared at her. "I live here." "You were staying here." "My mother brought me home." "My sister was generous." That sentence told me everything. She had already rewritten the story. The lawyer kept talking. Practical matters, access to rooms, personal items, keys, inventory. I heard almost none of it, because I was staring at the ring on Marianne's hand, green oval stone, gold setting, the companion piece to my mother's bracelet. The same green flash buried inside my oldest memory. Ah, something moved inside me then, not understanding, recognition without shape. Marianne noticed where I was looking and folded her hands calmly. "You'll need support in the days ahead," she said. "I suggest contacting whoever raised you." Whoever raised you? As if 20 missing years were an inconvenience she was tired of hearing about. I stood. The lawyer rose too, expecting a scene. I gave him none. Instead, I said quietly, "She gave me a key." For less than a second, Marianne's face changed, sharp, alarmed, gone. "I don't know what you mean." Of course she did. I walked upstairs while guests downstairs balanced pastries and grief. The brass key was warm in my pocket. At the end of the hall, the locked door waited. And for the first time since my mother died, I felt like she had left me a hand to hold. If you were me in that moment, would you stay and fight or walk away? Tell me below. The key turned stiffly, as if the lock had not been opened often, or had been opened only by hands that knew exactly why it mattered. The door moved inward. No dust greeted me. Order did. Shelves labeled by year, binders marked by district, boxes stacked with handwritten tabs, maps pinned across 3 walls, red string connecting cities, dates, and names, envelopes arranged by county. This was not storage, it was pursuit. My mother had built a room out of refusal. 20 years of refusing to let me become a closed case. Every wall carried proof of love in its least romantic form. Receipts, reports, letters, notes, photographs, phone numbers with question marks beside them. A mother's grief had learned how to file itself. I stepped farther inside and closed the door halfway behind me. For a moment I forgot Marianne, forgot the lawyer, forgot the paper downstairs telling me I had 48 hours to disappear. Because this room told a different story, not that I had been lost, that I had been looked for. There were years marked with more activity than others. The first 5 years were frantic. Every month had new names, new cities, new dead ends. Then the middle years slowed, not because she stopped loving me, because hope is expensive when it keeps failing. Then activity surged again 3 years earlier. New technology, new databases, new private investigators, new chance. She had started over, for me. On the desk sat a leather folder with my real name written across the front, not the name I grew up using, my name, the one she had whispered when she first saw me. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were the DNA results, draft petitions, updated identity forms, a revised estate packet prepared by Harlan Price. Everything Marianne claimed was unfinished, was partly true, but everything Marianne implied was false. My mother had not been confused. She had been preparing. She had been careful. She had been trying to make sure no one could take me away again. And still, they did. Then I found the envelope. Cream paper. My name in my mother's handwriting. My fingers froze over it. I knew before opening it that this was not meant for a normal day. Normal days do not require sealed letters and secret keys. I opened it slowly. My darling girl, if you are reading this, something has interrupted time again. I pray I am simply late, and you are using my key too early. But if not, hear this first. I never stopped choosing you. If law delays what love already knows, do not mistake delay for defeat. You are my daughter in every room that matters. Mr. Price knows more than I have been able to say out loud. Trust him if you can reach him. One more thing. Marianne was at the market the day you vanished. She claimed she arrived later after hearing the news. I learned recently that she lied about the timing. I am trying to understand why. I am sorry I found this truth so late. Love that never paused, Mom. I read it once, then again, then pressed the page against my chest because paper suddenly felt heavier than breath. I had spent years believing no one had stayed awake, wondering where I was. But here was a whole room proving otherwise. My mother had missed birthdays. I did not know she was mourning. She had kept a room I thought no one remembered. She had chased ghosts because one of them was me. In a lower drawer, I found photographs purchased from a street photographer who had worked the market that day. My mother must have bought every image he still had. One photograph stopped my breathing. A child near a fruit stall. Half-turned, blurry. Me. And behind me, reaching through the crowd, a woman's wrist, green oval bracelet, flashing in sunlight. The same family stone. The matching piece to the ring Marianne wore downstairs. Another photo showed only a shoulder and a partial profile reflected in a shop mirror. Blurry, but enough. Not enough to end a case, enough to begin one. The photograph was not proof by itself. I knew that. A blurred wrist could not carry 20 years of truth alone. But it gave me direction. A bracelet clasp, a family stone, a reflection in glass, a place to start asking better questions. Truth did not arrive as one perfect piece. It arrived as fragments that finally pointed the same way. My oldest memory rearranged itself in seconds. I had not simply lost sight of my mother. I had followed the wrong hand. Then I heard footsteps. Outside the door. Coming closer. Before fear could stop me, I pulled out my phone. I took pictures of every page I could. The letter, the signature, the market photographs, the name Harlan Price, the revised documents. My hands shook so badly half the photos blurred. But blurred proof was still proof. Then I slid the real letter into my coat, the folder into my bag, the photographs beneath it. I turned just as the door opened. Marianne stood there. Her eyes moved first to the open drawer, then to the photo in my hand, then to my face. "You shouldn't be in here." Her voice was controlled. Her expression was not. "She knew you were there," I said. I lifted the letter just enough for her to see my mother's handwriting. "She was grieving," Marianne replied too quickly. "People invent patterns when they suffer. This was written before she died. She wanted someone to blame." I stepped closer. "And you wanted someone removed?" Silence sharpened between us. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then Marianne stepped toward the desk, not toward me, toward the papers, toward the folder, toward anything she could still control. That was when I understood. This room was not painful to her, it was dangerous. I lifted the bag before she reached it. Her voice changed, lower, harder. "You have until tomorrow morning." No more gentle tone, no more family language, just command. I walked past her. At the doorway, I paused. "You made one mistake," I said. She gave a thin smile. "Only one?" "You assumed I would leave empty-handed." That night, I packed what mattered, not everything, just the things that still knew my name. Clothes, the garden photo of my mother and me, her letter, the folder, the market photographs, the wooden rabbit from my childhood room, and the phone full of shaking, blurry proof. By sunrise, I stood at the front door with one suitcase. The hallway behind me was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a crime no one wants to name. Marianne stood near the stairs, wrapped in silk, wrapped in certainty. "You were never really hers," she said one last time. I opened the door. "No," I answered, "I was always hers." "You were just closer." Then I walked out, not dramatically, not proudly, just upright. Sometimes that is the only victory left. I rented a room above a laundromat 3 neighborhoods away. The pipes screamed at dawn. the mattress bent in the center. The window faced a brick wall so close it felt personal. It smelled like detergent, dust, and other people's exhaustion. It was perfect. No chandeliers pretending warmth, no polished wood hiding contempt, just one room, and the price of staying in it. I took 3 jobs in the first month: morning receptionist at a clinic, afternoon cashier in a stationery store, night filing assistant for a small accounting office that smelled like printer ink and old coffee. On weekends, I cleaned empty apartments between tenants. I slept in fractions, ate cheaply, spoke little. Grief does not always cry. Sometimes, it budgets. At night, I read my mother's letter until the folds softened. If law delays what love already knows, do not mistake delay for defeat. That sentence became structure when emotion failed me. I tried to reach Harlan Price, calls unanswered, letters returned, receptionists repeating the same word, unavailable. Eventually, I learned he had resigned within weeks of my mother's death, quietly relocated. No scandal, no explanation, too neat to be innocent. I thought about fighting immediately, going back, demanding answers, standing on that porch until someone listened. Then reality corrected me. Truth requires more than truth. It requires money, time, stability, people willing to read what you bring them. I had almost none of that. So I made the decision that looked like surrender. I stopped chasing the house and started building the woman who could return properly. I enrolled in evening courses for legal administration and records compliance, cheap classes, long train rides, fluorescent rooms full of exhausted adults trying to become harder to dismiss. I learned enough to understand one thing clearly: paper can hurt you, but paper can also remember what people try to deny. That became my reason to keep going. Then came winter. The electricity was cut for 2 nights after I paid rent late. I slept in my coat, my breath visible in the room. The laundromat downstairs stayed bright and warm until midnight, so I sat there pretending to read while people folded towels around me. No one knew I had been in a mansion 3 months earlier. No one knew my mother had left me a letter. No one knew I was holding myself together with paper. On the 3rd morning, I carried the framed garden photo of my mother and me to a pawn shop. I stood outside for 10 minutes. The man inside was weighing someone's wedding ring under a harsh lamp. I looked down at my mother's hand on my shoulder in the photo. Then I walked away. There are things poverty can take, and things it cannot have. 2 years later, I was hired as junior support staff at a small law firm handling family property disputes. No glamour, no big office, no dramatic clients crying in conference rooms, just boxes, receipts, old letters, people pretending money was the reason they were angry. I worked under Rosa Martinez, 62, terrifyingly exact, kind only during medical emergencies. She corrected margins with the passion of religion. Feelings are for after filing, she liked to say. I loved her instantly. When she learned I stayed late studying old cases, she began leaving extra files on my desk. Read Why Liars Lose. So I did. Patterns emerged. Forgers rush signatures. Greedy people over-control timelines. Cowards remove witnesses before records. And everyone underestimates quiet women carrying folders. By year 3, I had enough savings for a better apartment, not beautiful, but dry, quiet, mine. By year 4, I lawfully requested archived public records tied to my disappearance through a training research project. That was when I found the buried notation: possible second adult present near child prior to disappearance. No follow-up conducted. Someone had seen another adult near me. Someone had chosen not to continue. By year 5, I tracked the market photographer through old permit files. He had died, but his daughter still kept boxes of negatives in her garage. I paid for one day among dust and forgotten faces. We found 3 more images from that afternoon. In one, the bracelet clasp was clear. In another, Marianne's profile appeared faintly in mirrored glass. Not enough to prove everything, enough to point truth in one direction. Then came the worst night of those 6 years. Not because I was poor. Not because I was tired. Because I almost let her keep my future too. Rent rose unexpectedly, my car battery died. 2 freelance accounts ended the same week. I sat on my kitchen floor with overdue bills spread around me like accusations. For 1 long hour, I hated my mother's letter. Not because of what it said, because it asked me to keep going, and I was tired. I nearly burned every copy I had. Instead, I noticed faint pressure marks on the back page, indentations, writing from a sheet once above it. I shaded gently with pencil. Words surfaced. Price. Vault copy signed. 3:10 p.m. I stared until the letters blurred. My mother had completed something official enough to store. Something real. Something Marianne never found. And for the first time in years, hope no longer felt expensive. But it also no longer felt gentle. It felt like a door opening in the dark. And I knew exactly who I needed to find. The next morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise. Rosa was already there, of course she was. She drank black coffee strong enough to dissolve regret and reviewed files as if each page had personally offended her. "You look dangerous," she said without looking up. "I found something. That usually means paperwork." I placed my mother's letter on her desk. Then I showed her the penciled words. Price. Vault copy signed. 3:10 p.m. She read it twice, then finally looked at me. "You have not told me the whole story." "I know. Do you want sympathy or strategy?" "Strategy." "Excellent. Sympathy is expensive and rarely useful before breakfast." By noon, Rosa had drawn a map on a yellow legal pad. Not a legal map, a human one. Who knew what? Who moved first? Who benefited? Who disappeared when questions began? That was how she taught me to think. "Documents don't betray people," she said. "People do. Documents only show where they stood when they did it." We started with Harlan Price, not by stealing files, not by breaking rules. By following public records, old firm announcements, address changes, and one retirement notice written so politely it sounded like guilt wearing a tie. Price had not vanished. He had moved to inactive status and relocated to a coastal town 2 hours away. No scandal, no discipline, no obituary. Just a quiet exit from a life where he had once been trusted. Rosa drove. She said it was because my old car sounded like it was negotiating with death. I think she also knew I needed someone beside me. Price lived in a narrow white house facing the sea. Wind rattled the porch screen. For a moment, I stood outside and hated him before he opened the door. Then he did, older now, thinner, guilty before I spoke. He recognized me immediately. "I wondered when you'd come," he said. That sentence told me enough. Inside, I remained standing. My mother completed something before she died. He closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." Rage rose so fast I tasted metal. "You let them throw me out." "No," he said softly. "I let myself be pushed aside before I could stop it." Cowardice always sounds thoughtful in retrospect. He explained. My mother had not waited until after she met me to prepare. She had begun before that first knock on my apartment door. Quietly, carefully, afraid to hope out loud, still making room for me. The day before her death, she signed updated papers, not just drafts, signed papers. They recognized me as her daughter through the DNA results and old identity records. They protected certain employees and charities. They left Marianne a stipend and limited residence rights in the West Wing. And then, they named me. Not as a guest, not as a question. As her child. Price had arranged for the original packet to be held in a private vault connected to his old firm until it could be properly recorded after the weekend. That was what saved Marianne for years. The original was not sitting in Price's desk. It was locked behind a dispute she created before Monday ever arrived. After my mother died Friday afternoon, Marianne moved fast. She brought in another lawyer. She questioned the DNA. She threatened to accuse Price of manipulating a grieving woman. She threatened scandal around the company. She threatened to freeze payroll and drag employees into court. Price hesitated. That was all she needed. He told himself he was preventing chaos. He told himself he would fix it once emotions cooled. He told himself many gentle lies. "Why didn't you find me?" I asked. Price looked down. "I tried once." My hands tightened. "What does that mean?" "I sent a letter to the address I had on record. It came back through Marianne's office. After that, she warned me that if I contacted you directly, she would accuse me of manufacturing documents after Evelyn's death." "And you believed her?" "No," he said. "I feared her." Rosa's voice turned cold. "There's a difference between being afraid and letting a child be erased." Price nodded. "I know." Then he looked at me. "I chose my license over your name." That confession did not make him noble. It made him useful. "And what did you keep?" Rosa asked. Her voice could cut glass. Price walked to a cabinet and returned with a sealed duplicate packet. "Enough to reopen the door," he said. "But not enough," I told myself, "for a frightened man to walk through it alone." Rosa looked at him with open disgust. "At least you named the man correctly." I opened the packet. There was my mother's signature, the witness pages, the DNA confirmation, and one handwritten note in blue ink. "Bring my daughter home properly." I had to sit. For 6 years, I believed her intentions died unfinished. They had not. She had chosen me in law, in ink, in process. Marianne had not defeated my mother's will. She had delayed it. There is a difference, a cruel one. Then Price gave us one more thing, a voicemail automatically archived by his old office system. He pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room. "Harlan, if Marianne contacts you again, do not discuss my daughter with her." A pause. "She was at the market that day." "I'm nearly certain now. I need proof, but I won't ignore this anymore." The message ended. No tears came, only clarity. My mother had known enough to fear her own sister. Price agreed to testify, not nobly, necessarily. Rosa accepted before I spoke. Then she turned to me. "You have what you need now." "To win?" "No," she said, "to stop begging people to believe you." Within a month, the case was reopened. Not with speeches, with my mother's signature, with the duplicate Price should have revealed years earlier, with the voicemail Marianne never knew existed, with photographs she had not destroyed, and with the truth she thought had grown too old to matter. Marianne responded exactly as Rosa predicted: denial, delay, reputation management. Then she made one mistake. She asked for a private meeting before the hearing. People ask for privacy when truth dislikes sunlight. I agreed to meet her in the house she took, not because I wanted closure, because I wanted her off script. The house looked smaller when I returned, not because it had changed much, because I had. The magnolia trees still lined the drive, but several had gone untrimmed. A gutter sagged near the west wing, paint peeled beneath a second-floor window. Neglect enters quietly, so does consequence. Marianne received me in the blue sitting room instead of the study. Strategic choice, softer chairs, warmer lighting, less memory. She did not want my mother's desk between us. She did not want the room where a lawyer had once erased me with polite sentences. She wanted comfort on her side of the table. Tea waited for 2, thin china cups, silver tray, lemon slices arranged with precision. I did not touch mine. She wore pearls and a cream suit. People who are losing often dress like they are not. "You've become dramatic," she said lightly. I became harder to dismiss. Her smile thinned. We sat across from one another with a low table between us, civilized enemies in a beautiful room. I'm willing to be generous, she began. That word again. People rarely use generosity when they mean fairness. She slid an envelope toward me. I left it unopened. You still misunderstand why I'm here. I understand perfectly, she said. You want compensation. No, I said. I want the story told correctly. Her eyes cooled. Stories are emotional. Records are what matter. Good, I said. Then I opened my folder. I placed my mother's signed packet on the table. Not all of it, just enough. Her signature. The note in blue ink. Bring my daughter home properly. For the first time, Marianne did not speak immediately. Her eyes moved over the handwriting. She knew it. She respected it, even against her will. She was unwell, Marianne said. She was determined. She was vulnerable. She was your sister. That landed, not loudly, but it landed. I placed Price's statement beside it. Then the photograph from the market, not the clearest one, the first one, the bracelet, the reaching hand, the flash of green. Marianne glanced at it and looked away too quickly. I did not accuse her. That would have given her something simple to deny. Instead, I said, the photograph doesn't prove everything. Her eyes flickered. It never had to. She said nothing. It only made me ask better questions. Her mouth tightened. I leaned back slightly. You didn't hate me first. That caught her, just for a second. You hated the chair my mother kept empty. Stop. You hated the room she wouldn't change. I said stop. You hated every birthday cake she couldn't eat because I wasn't there. Marianne's fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. You don't know anything. I know you didn't lose your sister when I came back, I said. You lost the lie that you had been the loyal one. That was the first real crack. Not in her face. In the room. The air changed. I let it. Then I said, the photographer saw a woman near the flower stall. She snapped before she could stop herself. No. One syllable. Small. Sharp. Too fast. I kept my face still. No? I asked. Her mouth tightened. I mean, those old photographs are unreliable. Of course. I slid the second photo forward. The reflection in the shop mirror. Blurred, partial. Not enough to end anything. Enough to disturb someone who remembered the room. This one suggests the woman moved toward the west corridor. Marianne looked up. Not at the photo. At me. And there it was. The second crack. I had not asked if she was in the west corridor. I had offered her the wrong detail. Because the photographer's note did not say west corridor. It said flower stall. The west corridor came from old market maps, sightlines, and my own reconstruction. From a place only someone who had been there would feel the need to correct. You are inventing geography now, she said. Am I? You were near the eastern exit when they found. She stopped, too late. I let the silence stretch. The public version of the report never mentioned the eastern exit. Only internal notes did. Only the files my mother collected did. Only someone very close to that day would know. You seem familiar with records you said you never saw, I said. I lived through that day. You told police you arrived after hearing I was missing. That was 20 years ago. But the statement was signed. I placed it gently on the table. She did not read it. She remembered it. Her hand moved toward the teacup, then stopped. If she lifted it, it would shake, so she left it there. I protected this family, she said. There it was, the sentence she lived inside. You protected yourself. You arrived from nowhere. No records. No history anyone in this family could verify. Evelyn was grieving before she even knew you. She was desperate. You used that. I looked at her for a long moment, not angry, not wounded, just done. You keep describing a mother loving her child as weakness. Her nostrils flared. Because you don't understand what she became after you disappeared. No, I said quietly. I understand better than you think. She laughed once, bitter. You think that room upstairs was love? I did not answer. It was obsession. Every birthday, every holiday, every dinner where she looked at an empty chair. Her voice sharpened. Do you know what it is like to live beside a ghost? I thought of the pale yellow room, the height marks, the rabbit, the files. Yes, I said, I was the ghost. That stopped her. Only for a second, but enough. Then she hardened again. You want to make me a villain, because it helps you live with the truth. No, I said. I came here because villains usually leave fingerprints when they call themselves protectors. I reached into my folder again. This time I placed the recorder on the table, not hidden, visible, already running. Her eyes dropped to it, then back to me. You recorded me? I documented the meeting. Her mouth curved. You really did become one of them. No, I said, I became someone you could not move out of a room. For the first time she stood, too fast. This meeting is over. I stayed seated. Power often looks exactly like that. One person standing because she needs height. One person sitting because she no longer needs permission. You can end the meeting, I said, but you cannot end what has already been said. Her face changed, not fear exactly, recognition. She was beginning to understand I had not come for a clean confession, I had come for pressure, and pressure reveals shape. She looked toward the fireplace, then the windows, then the door, as if searching for the old version of the house, the version where she decided who stayed. There was none left, only time, and time had changed sides. If you were in my place, would you forgive her, or choose peace from a distance? Tell me below. She stood by the fireplace for several seconds, still, perfectly dressed, perfectly cornered. I could see her choosing which mask to wear next. Grief, indignation, insulted innocence. She had used all three before. Finally, she chose contempt. You think because you learned to file papers, you understand this family? No, I said. I think because I was erased by this family, I understand it better than most. Her eyes sharpened. You were not erased. I looked at her. She looked away first. That was new. You were lost, she said. Children get lost. Yes, I answered. They do. Then I placed one more photo on the table, not the bracelet photo, not the mirror reflection, a third one. A crowd shot from the market. Nothing obvious at first, just people moving through rain, a fruit stall, a flower cart, a corridor entrance in the background. And near the edge, a child's hand held by an adult woman whose face was turned away. The image was grainy, imperfect, but the bracelet clasp was visible, a custom hook shaped like a tiny leaf. The kind no one would notice unless they had spent years staring at it in dreams. Marianne saw it. Her face did not collapse. That would have been too easy. Instead, something worse happened. She became calm, too calm. That proves nothing. No, I said, not alone. I let the silence work. 10 seconds, 15, 20. Then I said softly, my mother knew you lied. Her jaw tightened. She knew nothing. She knew enough to leave me the key. She was dramatic. She knew enough to tell Price not to speak with you. She was paranoid. She knew enough to say you were at the market. Marianne turned too fast, because I told her I was there after the call came. After, I repeated. Yes. That was your statement. Exactly. Then why did you correct the flower stall? She froze. I did not move. I never said the woman in the photo was standing in the wrong place, I said. Her lips parted, then closed. The west corridor came from you. For the first time, she had no answer ready. The photo had not convicted her. Her correction had. The bracelet made me look. The old files made me ask. But Marianne's own mouth placed her where no public record ever had. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower. When Evelyn lost you, the entire house became a grave. I said nothing. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She stopped seeing anyone else. Every birthday, every holiday, every dinner, there was an empty chair between us. Her voice sharpened. You think you were the only one who lost something? No, I said. But I was 5. That cut through the room. For 1 second, something human crossed her face, then vanished. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she whispered. There it was, not a villain's confession, a sentence leaking through a crack. What didn't you mean? She closed her eyes. Don't. What didn't you mean, Marianne? Anger returned because anger was safer. You were crying. Evelyn was distracted. I took your hand. I told myself I was helping. She stopped. Like even now, 20 years later, the truth still frightened her. Helping. The word almost made me laugh. But I stayed quiet. I wanted 10 minutes, she said. Just 10 minutes where Evelyn would look for you, the way I had spent years looking for her inside that house. And then? You slipped away. Her face paled. I lost sight of you near the bus lanes. I searched. I swear I searched. For how long? Long enough to understand what I had done. And then? Her mouth trembled. Then I chose myself. That was the truth, not the accident, the choice after it. I stood slowly. You could have told the truth 20 years ago. And lose her forever? You lost her anyway. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. Some people cannot cry, because tears require surrender. I placed one final notice on the table. Plain language, a hearing date, a review of the estate, a stop to further transfers until the truth was examined. You can cooperate, I said, or you can keep pretending this house still listens to you. And if I lose everything? I looked around the room, the silver tray, the expensive rug, the curtains my mother probably chose. You won't lose everything, I said. You'll lose what was never yours. Behind me, her voice came smaller. Did she hate me? I stopped. That question belonged to a sister, not a thief, not a liar. A sister who had ruined everything and still wanted one window of love left open. No, I said, she pitied you. I did not look back. The hearings began 6 weeks later. They were quiet. No dramatic handcuffs. No screaming. Just my mother's signature, Price's testimony, the photos, the recording, and Marianne's own words, finally heavier than her lies. What she had moved into her own hands began moving back. The people my mother had tried to protect were no longer trapped under Marianne's silence. The house was returned to the estate. The missing child file was reopened. Marianne lost control slowly, in installments, which felt right. She had stolen in installments too. A minute at the market, a lie to police, a silence that lasted 20 years. I did not move back into the house. I sold 2 commercial assets, funded the shelter network that once housed me, and created a missing child legal assistance fund, in my mother's name. That felt more like inheritance than marble countertops ever could. I kept only one thing, the pale yellow bedroom door. Restored. Hung in my apartment hallway. A reminder that waiting rooms can become exits. Months later, I visited my mother's grave alone. I brought magnolias from the trees she loved. Her stone read, Evelyn Carter, beloved daughter, loyal friend, mother returned too late. I sat beside her for a long time. Then I fastened her green bracelet around my wrist. I used to think the worst moment of my life was the second her hand disappeared from mine. But standing there, I understood something softer. Her hand had not disappeared forever. It had become a room kept waiting, a letter hidden for me, a key in my palm, a truth that refused to die. I touched the stone and whispered, "You found me." Not perfectly, not long enough, not in time to save everything, but she found me. And for a girl who grew up believing no one was looking, that was everything. I lost my mother twice, once in a crowd, once to time. But neither loss defined me. The lie did not keep me, the theft did not shrink me, the delay did not erase me. Truth was late, so was love, so was I, but we all arrived eventually. And that was enough. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Tell me where you listened from below. And if this story touched you, would you choose forgiveness or peace from a distance? I'd truly love to know.